And welcome back, my friends, to another exciting episode here at ColeJakeTV, where each and every weekday, we book by book, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, we go through expositorily each and every book of the Bible. Right now, we're in the Gospel of Luke. And if you've been with us this week and last week, you're seeing that we're slowly traversing through the first 5 chapters of the Gospel of Luke. We've made it up to verse 14, and this is where Jesus identifies the list of the 12. It's interesting how Jesus will go through and identify each and every name of the 12 in whom he has called to be his apostles. So if you open your Bibles today, we're going to pick up where we left off last time, which is where really a listing by Jesus of each of the 12 apostles to whom he chose. So we're picking up from where we left off yesterday, verse 14, and it begins like this. Simon, whom he also named Peter, and Andrew, his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon, called the Zealot, Judas the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who also became a traitor. So you see what we really do not know that much about most of these men that Jesus has just identified. Peter, Andrew, James, John. We know something about these men. Yet of the other 8, we pretty much only know their name. If you study throughout the Gospels and look into each and every single one of these disciples' name, I think their fame is ultimately reserved for heaven. We already know from Revelation chapter 21, verse 14, that God says their names are on the 12 foundations of God's heavenly city. You know, there are many rather interesting connections with this group. Can you make the connections, my friends? To my brothers at NCM, can you make the connections? Let's take a look. So there are brothers. James and John are brothers. Peter and Andrew are brothers. There are also business associates, fishermen. Peter, James, John, and Andrew were all fishermen. Opposing political views, well, Matthew, also known as Levi, was a Roman-friendly tax collector. And Simon, well, he was a Roman-hating zealot. And then we also, of course, have Iscariot, Judas, who ultimately becomes, as it points out here, a traitor. You know, Judas Iscariot's surname, Iscariot, probably from the research I've done, indicates that he was from a particular city by the name of Corinth, which is rather interesting. From the research I've done, it seems to me that he may have been the only other Judean among the 12 besides Jesus. So it might have just been, it seems that the names of the 12 disciples are usually in range or are arranged in pairs. Have you noticed this? So whenever you read the disciples' names, you'll often notice that they're going to come through in pairs. Peter and Andrew are generally paired together. James and John are generally paired together. Philip and Bartholomew are basically paired together. Remember, Bartholomew was also known as Nathaniel. Matthew also was known as Levi. And Thomas, remember, his name means the twin. You know what I really find interesting, my friends, is that Jesus still chose Judas, knowing he would be the traitor, identifying him as a traitor, knowing how he would turn out and become a traitor. And yet, Jesus later told his disciples that he chose them, and he knew one of them was a devil. I find that rather interesting. Let's keep going. Verse 17. And he came down with them and stood on a level place with a crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea and Jerusalem and from the sea coast of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him and be healed of their diseases, as well as those who were tormented with unclean spirits. And they were healed. And the whole multitude sought to touch him, for power went out from him and healed them all. Isn't it interesting how Jesus came down with his disciples to serve and to bless? To serve and to bless. You know, it speaks about and stood on a level place. The work described in these few verses, 17 to 19, and the teaching recorded till the end of the chapter, as we continue throughout this particular chapter, it says it took place on a level place. For some, this might be a little bit of a helpful distinction for you. It helps mark the following teachings from the teaching on the mountain, or also known as the teaching on the mount. And this was described in Matthew chapter 5 to 7. An interesting fact, though, that I found from regarding the Sea of Galilee. Some have observed that the area around the Sea of Galilee, including the traditional Mount of Beatitudes, which we'll get into later, where the Sermon on the Mount is said to be delivered, is like a mountain when looking from the Sea of Galilee, but like a level place when one stands on or above it. And it speaks of a great multitude of people. It speaks from all over these different places: Judea, Jerusalem, the seacoast of Tyre, all the way to Sidon. It really illustrates that people came from great many distances, all over the place, to see and hear and be healed by Jesus, to be delivered from demonic spirits by Jesus, to be healed of any kind of health problems. But ultimately, what is Jesus doing? He's dealing with sin. He's dealing with sin, and he's dealing with unclean spirits, and he's dealing with affliction and addiction and so many things that we struggle with even inside our present day. You remember the woman at the well? Or really more specifically, remember the woman with the issue of blood that touched the hem of Jesus' garment? Do you remember what Jesus said? Immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out from him. The moment this woman, by faith, made contact with the hem of his garment, power had gone out from him. Keep this in mind, my friends. To my brothers at NCM, to our fellow followers here at ColeJakeTV, from coast to coast and all over the world, Jesus says you've got to count the cost. You must count the cost when you choose to follow him. As Jesus served the needs of others, we're called to do the same. We're called to serve the needs of others. We see Jesus both in his preaching and in his teaching, even in his miraculous deeds. Something was always going out from him. It cost him something to be used of God. My friends, it's going to cost us something to be used of God. It's going to cost us something to serve others. But as we prepare to enter into verse 20 tomorrow, let's hold that near and dear to our hearts today. As we walk with the Lord, serve with a mighty, glad heart, happy are we who've been called forth from darkness into the light. We'll pick up where we left off today, tomorrow, as I'm your messenger GB here at CJTV. We'll see you next time. Have a blessed day.